Thank you for joining us for this segment of Tuesday Talks with the Maestro. I'm Ken Andrews, founder, music director, and conductor for the Orchestra of Northern New York, and I'm here today with my very special guest, Charles Guy, as we know him as Chuck Guy for all of us. And Chuck has had an amazing career, and I hope you'll go onto our ONNY.org website and see all the amazing things that he has done in his career to this point. But he's currently our principal tuba for the orchestra, and he's professor of tuba at the Crane School of Music and a member of the Potsdam Brass Quintet, among many other things. So I hope you'll enjoy yourself and see his bio. Chuck, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's always great to talk to the maestro.
It's great to be closer than the 50 feet it normally is.
Yep.
Or with social distancing, maybe 200 feet.
Exactly, yeah.
It's going to be. I wanted to ask you, before we talk a little bit about the orchestra, a little bit about your beginning. Where did you grow up? And I wanted to ask you with that, was tuba actually the first instrument you started with?
Yeah, great. Hey, I grew up in a small town in Ohio named Beach City, which isn't much of a city and there's no beach, but that's the name of the town. It's just south of Canton, maybe 20 or 30 miles, so it's kind of in farmland. And I started out on trombone, where it was a great instrument for me to get started on, but I truly found my home with the tuba in 7th grade, it was from there, I just played in the school bands and continued on into college and everything. So.
That's great. I'm curious, so you started actually in a public school program, and when did you first start taking actual private lessons on tuba?
Yeah, so I was fortunate to have some people around me that were helpful, but I didn't take private lessons until I was a senior in high school. There was a student that was a couple years older than me that would tutor me every once in a while, and my band director happened to be a tuba player, so those were the two main influences early on. I certainly got a lot of information in less formalized ways from them, but then when I was a senior in high school is when I got a little more serious, and I started taking lessons with who would become my college teacher, Tucker Jolly, at the University of Akron. And so,
wonderful
that
player
was
and teacher, both.
Yep.
Both.
Yeah, it's a great man, wonderful mentor to me. So.
When I was teaching at Ohio University, I remember him
Yeah.
very well. Actually, he was very, very extremely wonderfully well known as a teacher and
Yep.
player. I'm curious, at what point in either junior high, high school, whenever it might have been, what point did you actually know that you wanted to pursue music as a career?
Yeah, that's a hard question, you know, because I think I was a lot like a lot of students where I was just doing whatever was in front of me, whether that be sports or band or whatever academics were there. So I would just do things, and it just eventually got to the place where I was doing much more music than anything else. And that was, you know, by desire, but it wasn't certainly something that I chose. It just kind of fell into there. But it was when I started taking private lessons, it became obvious that that's, you know, something that I wanted to pursue as a career. Nothing else seemed to make sense anymore. But, you know, before that, you know, I was doing all the science stuff and thought I was going to be an engineer, you know. But, you know, until then, you know, it just kind of made, you know, kind of funneled me into the music career that I have now. So.
Well, we're certainly glad you did, and I have to say that I've never heard any other tubist in any orchestra that I've worked with or been to that is a more sensitive player or has a sense of blend and sound that you have, and that's one thing I've always just admired so much in your playing.
I appreciate that.
Many aspects. I'm just curious, you know, a lot of young brass players, wind players actually, and particularly maybe tuba, don't get very much opportunity to play in an orchestra when they're in junior high or high school. Did you have any opportunities for orchestra in the early years?
Yeah, none at all until in my junior year. I did like all-state orchestra or something. That was my first opportunity, but it was in my senior year I started playing with Akron Youth Symphony, and that was a great opportunity. And interesting story is my conductor for the Akron Youth Symphony Orchestra was none other than Keith Lockhart, who is the conductor of the Boston Pops, so this was early on in his career, and so we we had 1 year together there, and including playing the Vaughan Williams Tuba Concerto together. So, so
what a great piece.
Yeah.
I'm curious, do you find any differences between playing in a band setting, and I know you're also principal tubist with the Northern Symphonic Winds as well, and so when you're playing in a band or an orchestral setting, do you feel there's much difference in how you have to go after it?
Yeah, absolutely. Orchestral playing and band playing are quite different. The biggest one, and it's the most obvious to people that look back there, is that when you look in the orchestra, there's only one of the tubists back there. In the bands, there's often 3 or 4. So that entirely changes the way that we view things. The big one is, I think of myself in the orchestra as a section with the trombones. So that's my section, versus the band, which the section is tubas and maybe extends to euphoniums. But I don't think of myself as being more connected to the trombones in that situation than I do any other brass. But in the orchestra, certainly, it's me and the 3 trombones sitting beside me that I think are very much centered around making that sound that we have.
I know all along the way, many times that we used to speak in school about the marriage, and the marriage was 3rd trombone and tuba.
Yep.
And just similar to that marriage between principal flute and oboe, where they have to create a sound, and that's a great combination.
Absolutely, yeah. So the relationship that I have with the bass trombonist is always very important. We have to work with intonation so that we set the foundation for the rest of the section, and that section extends all the way through the brass and hopefully to the rest of the orchestra too, in terms of intonation and then basic fundamentals of sound, those kinds of things. But yeah, me and the bass trombonist, I think, are very much the ones that need to connect if we're going to make the whole brass sound great.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, you've spent so many years with the Potsdam Brass Quintet, such a wonderful, wonderful ensemble. And how have you felt that, because every member of that group has either been a principal or a member of the Orchestra of Northern New York. And I'm curious how you feel that ensemble helped shape what I call the ONNY brass sound, which I've always, as I've said many times, is something I've always bragged about. Such a special sound.
Yeah, and first off, let me just say that playing with the Potsdam Brass Quintet is an incredible experience. These have been some of my best friends through the years, and it's been really a wonderful experience. And making music in that chamber setting is really an outstanding event. When we can extend that into an orchestra and have that be kind of the basis of the sound that we have, then that's just bonus for us. So the Potsdam Brass Quintet, as you're aware, we had 3 retirements from the Crane School of Music, which all members of the Potsdam Brass Quintet are on faculty at the Crane School of Music. So we actually are having a huge turnover for our group in the Potsdam Brass Quintet. We have 3 new members that will be joining us there. So it will be changing quite a bit for us. And obviously, we're going to be looking to recreate a lot of the things that we have had through the years.
Well, I'm sure it's challenging, but also exciting.
Absolutely.
It's a chance to rethink and everything else.
Yeah.
We've been so fortunate with John Ellis, who was our principal trumpet for 32 years, charter member of the orchestra. And for many years, he's been our liaison, musician liaison to the board. And you have been gracious enough with all you do at Crane, not only all your teaching and playing and everything else, you've been gracious enough to accept that with John's retirement this year. And I'm curious, how do you feel about assuming that position?
Oh, it's great. First off, I'm happy to have John as a mentor in terms of what has done on the board for so many years. So in terms of kind of what the board looks like, it's pretty exciting to bring a musician's perspective to that ensemble. There's a lot of musicians on that board, as you're aware of, but not everyone is playing in that orchestra actively. That's a great perspective that I hope that I can bring to that team. As I look through there, it's really interesting, the ideas that we hear in the board meetings and finding ways that we can facilitate that as musicians, I think, is really an outstanding challenge for us.
Especially in these tough times.
Yep.
It's even more, and I can't thank you enough for agreeing to take on that position. As I said, you do so many other things and have had worn so many hats at Crane as well. So it's really great to have your expertise and your background on that. I was excited when I found out that you were able to do this. Although it's a tough question, I'm just curious, as a brass player, are there particular composers that you enjoy orchestrally in terms of playing more than others?
Yeah, there's certainly composers that were better to us than some others. Obviously, we can start with the invention date of the tuba is 1835. So anybody before that, was unable to write for us. That's the way that I like to think of it. But since then, there've been many composers that I love to play. So, if you ask me my favorites, yeah, my ear is drawn to Mahler and Strauss. In the 20th century, Prokofiev and Bartok. There's a wide range, big orchestrations.
Yeah.
Obviously, those are the times that we get to play more and do things as the loudest members of the of the orchestra, perhaps. But those kinds of things are great. But if I go through my favorite composers, it certainly would extend to Bach and Beethoven and certainly Brahms. Brahms, I'm a little bit mad at him because he could have written more for us, but didn't. So, but when he did give us an opportunity, it was just gorgeous writing for us.
It's always surprised me that only the Second Symphony is the only one of the four that he writes for tuba, and it's so interesting because it's such a big sound. We only have a few minutes, but I wanted to ask you if in the time you've been with us, are there any particular concerts or pieces that you particularly enjoy?
Yeah, that's such a hard question because we've played so many, 18 years worth of concerts, and it's certainly been great to do some of the big works, through the years, things like Pictures and Exhibition or the Planets, those kinds of things have been great. But more of it's been kind of the memories that we've created, working as a section and seeing my colleagues do things across the orchestra. Those are the things that are really meaningful. So it's always super nice for us that work together, perhaps as teachers, to come together and play in those, and then extend that family out to the community members and the great musicians that we get from even farther away than just St. Lawrence County.
Yeah. So, well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I'm hoping to have you come back again, or maybe some of our viewers may see you with Tim Savage with his set of behind-the-scenes interviews as you get more and more into this role, because that liaison position between the musicians and the board and the conductor and everything else, it's so important, and I'm looking forward to this time together with that. And thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, and I really am looking forward to seeing other interviews that you do with people, just to see what all of the musicians are up to these days, especially since we haven't been together for a while. So, but
well, it's been fun, I have to say, and I hope you'll all join in next week as we have another Tuesday Talk with the Maestro. And thank you for joining us today, and please stay safe and stay healthy. Goodbye.